Hey everybody, welcome to another WOFOYO short. This is C-Dub. I'm going to bring some things out. I'm not going to read the whole thing because this is a short. In Mark 5, 1 through 20, is a story about the demoniac. In Matthew, it says Gadara. Mark's version says the Gerasenes. And so Jesus comes upon this demoniac. He's been hanging out in the tombs and the mountains, and he's crying and he's cutting himself. And man, I tell you what, I lived about a year in New Orleans. Above ground graveyards is a sketchy place to be, especially there. There's something that kind of attracts, and I worked in graveyards for a long, long, long time. My old man had a mowing business. We mowed graveyards. Man, they were doing that. My family, not me, but my family was doing that up until about 2, 3 years ago. And you know, you see some strange things. And when you get in them above ground graveyards, man, a lot of robbers, a lot of murders, a lot of other stuff won't even mention, rituals going on and stuff like that. For those of you familiar with this story, you can always read it yourself, get in the word for yourself. But he is possessed by what he says is a legion of demons. That's thousands of demons. And they said, don't torment us before the time. Don't send us into the abyss. Send us into those hogs over there on the hillside. They enter the hogs. Jesus tells, well, get out of him. You can go in the hogs if you want, but get out of this guy. And so all of a sudden, these pigs go nuts and rush down the steep bank of the mountain they're on and jump into the sea and drown. The herdsmen are watching this. That would have had to be a heck of a thing to see, though. And then they see the demon possessed man who had the legion. This is verse 15, sitting there, clothed in his right mind, and they were afraid. And those that had seen it described what had happened to the demon possessed man to the pigs. And they began to beg Jesus to depart from their region. And so the demon possessed man that got delivered, he's wanting to follow him. And he goes, no, just tell what good things the Lord has done for you. And he ends up publishing what happened. I want to point out a few things here, though. A lot of times, if we're complacent, if we're all about ourselves, and sometimes we might not be doing things that honor God, it gets, there's a very real temptation to be comfortable with the sin and misery of others. Now, granted, if somebody's sinning, that is their choice. But this guy is demonically possessed, depressed, and everybody's like, well, we done all we could do. We got to feed our hogs. Other question: why are Jewish herdsmen raising hogs, which are unclean animals? You can't eat them. Now, maybe you can sell them to the Romans to eat, or maybe some other group that is allowed to eat them. But, as a business, this is kind of questionable in and of itself, unless there's just something I'm totally ignorant of. But everybody's good as long as this guy is possessed and contained. And when that deliverance happens, and they got to deal with the same demons that this dude was dealing with, all of a sudden, whoa, 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 whoa. What's going on here, Jesus? There is in human nature this propensity to be comfortable with the misery of others as long as we're good. We can even profit off that a little bit. I, I see this, it reminded me reading this story, what it's like in a lot of our ghettos and a lot of our inner cities. It reminds me as someone who grew up in one of the poorer counties in southern Illinois. Uh, and my mom's side of the family was from the poorest. It reminds me of the attitude of Ask those people. They don't know any better. They don't know any better, because poverty's evil too, especially when it comes to an impoverished mindset. You can have a spirit of poverty over a family, over a person, over a region. You can have a poverty mentality parading itself as holiness, just like you can have a controlling and enslaving spirit parading itself as being decently and in order and maintaining the proper protocol in a church. When Jesus shows up and that thing isn't contained anymore, when there's real deliverance, when there are real moves of God that hit areas and hit families and hit people to where it affects things, when kingdom work shows up, it's not going to be popular. If you're showing up and doing kingdom work, you can expect deliverance, but you can also expect pushback by people that were profiting off of things they shouldn't have been and who were very, very comfortable in the idea of that's them folks over there. You leave them to that. As long as we're content, with what we have over here, let them be. We did all we could do. Not the right attitude. And you know what? With what's coming, with what the Lord's doing, that thing's going to get exposed too. So make sure you don't have that attitude. Something I'm checking myself on when I read it today. Make sure you don't have that attitude of being comfortable in other people's misery. And man, get that relationship right with the Lord so you can be the one bringing about deliverance. Also, don't be surprised if you bring deliverance to a church, if you bring deliverance to a family, if you bring deliverance to a community. Don't be surprised if it makes everybody uncomfortable and you get asked to leave. It's okay. WOFOYO.